Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, and North Carolina. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Visit firstbank.com to learn more. What's going on, Hokies fans? We got a fun one coming up in Lane Stadium on Saturday as the Clemson Tigers are in town. Virginia Tech with an opportunity to take down a top 25 team. We're ready to unpack it all. It's episode 389 of the Tech Sideline podcast, and it starts right now. And we're bringing you our preview pod on a Wednesday, November 6th, 2024, from our high-tech studios at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Remember to like, subscribe, refer the show to a friend, and head over to techsideline.com to check out our extensive editorial content. Subscriptions are just $12 a month for loads of content, and if you're a Virginia Tech student, your subscription, as always, is free. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, and this episode of the podcast is also brought to you by StubHub. Every order is 100% guaranteed on StubHub. StubHub's exclusive Fan Protect guarantee ensures valid tickets or your money back. Tech Sideline is a StubHub affiliate, so every time you click on the links or make a purchase, we get a commission while you get a safe, reliable purchase. And I think some introductions are in order. We got our football crew. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. To my right, Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist. Across the way, senior staff writer Andy Bitter. In the fourth chair, our founder and general manager, Mr. Will Stewart. And then Nick Brown. We got the floating mustache, and that's a little teaser for later or more podcasts to come. He's pushing the buttons, producing the show behind the scenes. All right, we're going to talk first about the press conference, then we're going to get into our Clemson preview, but just to set the table a little bit, number 23 Clemson comes into town inside Lane Stadium. Looking forward to a fun one, 3:30 kick on Saturday. Andy, looking at the press conference a couple of days ago at this point, what was there to take away predominantly on the injury side of things, because they had mentioned Mansour Delane, and then obviously everyone's on their edge of their seat about Drones and Tootin.
Yeah, well, he gave us an answer. We'll see if that's the correct answer or an accurate answer. You know, last week he said Drones and Tootin were probable, and this week they're questionable. So after a week of rest and not playing in the game, they got worse. So that kind of tells you they weren't being truthful with us last week about this whole thing. So Drones, Tootin, Mansour Delane, all questionable right now. So if you want to go by the definition of how the NFL would do it, that's 50-50 chance, I think, of playing in the game. So I don't know exactly what that's going to mean. I don't know if he's being truthful this time. You know, he could go out to practice today and they could be out there, you know, fully dressed and, you know, running through individual drills, and it doesn't mean a whole lot for the game Saturday. So at this point, I think myself, I'm just preparing as though they're not going to play in this game. And if they do happen to get better and play by the time they get out there, they're probably not going to be 100% anyway. So I think it's going to be some sort of limitation if they do go, and you know, if they do go or not, it's sort of up in the air.
How about Mansour Delane? Because that was a little bit different of a situation.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when that happened. I know he wasn't out there the last couple drives of that Syracuse game. I don't know if it happened you know, when he got hit on that play by Mose Phillips. I think he was in on the extra point after that, though. So I don't know exactly what happened there and why he was out. As usual, the Hokies are not forthcoming with injury you know, details about that whole thing. They're not very big on saying what is bothering these guys. Not even to say that, you know, Drones and Tootin, who have been in walking boots, have an ankle issue or something like that. So not sure what's up there, but, you know, that's a pretty important piece, because this is a passing offense coming in with Clemson that has some guys that can do things.
Yeah, he had a huge game, too, a forced fumble and an interception against Syracuse. How about a little bit of clarification on the end of the first half on the road at Syracuse?
I don't know if you're going to get more clarification. You'll get more words.
Sure.
I don't think it's clearing up the situation at all. You know, the way Pry was talking about is, had I had all the information that we got later, I probably would have handled it different. It's like, well, that's not helping your cause at all. Why didn't you get that information in the moment?
Right.
You know, why did the officials weren't being clear about this thing? So make them be clear about it. Like, halt the game at that point to get that information. So I guess he's being truthful about the situation and talking more about it, but I don't feel like he's helping his cause in the fans' eyes or people just, looking at this program and going, how are you handling these end of half situations? Do you really know everything that's going on in that situation? Because, second, third, fourth explanation now, it still doesn't seem satisfactory once you get the answer.
Lastly, in the press conference, Coach had talked a little bit about this notion of one-score games and the struggles for this team.
Yeah, finishing is a big emphasis for this team right now. I've written it a couple times this week already. They'd be 8-0-1 if the games ended at the 2-minute warning this season. They've given up the go-ahead score in the last 2 minutes or overtime in all 4 of their losses. So that's a team that doesn't finish. That's defensive problems. That's offense not being able to come back the other way and answer, even though, you could debate whether they actually did answer in that Miami game or not. But, that's the difference between, being an ACC contender right now and fighting for your bowl lives is not being able to finish these games. I feel like this is still a pretty good team, but you do need that part of the game to finish the game and finish off these wins and win a close one, which this staff has not really proven that they can do.
You got to wonder if that's just in their heads at this point, and you get in that situation and you kind of tighten up.
It might be, it might be that. It might be management. It might be fatigue at the end of the game. Like they're examining this, and that's one thing Pry says. We're looking at everything in terms of how much are you practicing during the week, how much are they rotating during the games? Is that leading to fatigue at the end of the games? But I thought it was interesting. He's like, it's a mindset. And it's about having an aggressive mindset on defense, which I thought was so interesting because they did not have that aggressive mindset on offense in certain situations to try to close the game out. So it's sort of some mixed messages going on with this whole thing. I think the bottom line is they need to play better, and they need to play better to win these games.
Well, for our full press conference recap, you can go ahead and click right here. Carter Hill's got you covered with everything you need to know and what Brent Pry and the players had to say in this week's press conference heading into the Clemson game. Speaking of Clemson, number 23 Clemson rolls into town. We mentioned it, 3:30 kick. You can watch it on ESPN. You can listen to Mike and Bill. You can also listen to 3304 Sports, our student broadcast. Mark Jones in town. So you got a great crew on ESPN. This is kind of one of the more spotlighted games Virginia Tech's had as far as a television slot all season long. And it's the Hokie effect, a stripe out. Get this, guys. This, when I looked at this, I was almost a little taken aback, but it makes complete sense. Virginia Tech looks to be its first ranked opponent since the season opener against number 10 UNC in 2021. That was the first game I ever was here for as a student, and they haven't beat a ranked team since.
It was a great atmosphere for that game. And
it was. The first one coming out of COVID, that was like huge.
Oh, it was
huge atmosphere.
And this will be great, too. It's Clemson. It's a name team. Home games are fun. The second half is going to be played under the lights because of the time change this past week. So it's going to be a great atmosphere for everybody. I just wish both teams had won last week. Otherwise, it would be even bigger.
It is such a downer.
It is.
It's like, is College Game Day going to come here? Could this be? Could the win vault one of these teams in the ACC title picture? And now it's just like they're playing out the string. They're both chasing Miami and SMU in the ACC. And, Virginia Tech's not going to catch them. Clemson possibly could. But this had like all the makings of like a big primetime matchup. But now it's just kind of like another game in the ACC.
Yep. Clemson fell to Louisville last week, a disappointment for them. That was at home, too, and they rarely lose at home at Memorial Stadium in Death Valley. Virginia Tech obviously loses at Syracuse. Last season for the Tigers, 9-4, 4-4 in the ACC. They missed the ACC title game. They're trying to avoid missing it for the second consecutive season. They beat Kentucky in the Gator Bowl to finish off last season. I find Clemson this year to be an incredibly fascinating team. They're the only team outside of the service academies that did not bring in a transfer. That was a big storyline heading into the year. They're 6-2, 5-1 in ACC play. They were blown out in the season opener by Georgia, 34-3, the final score, but then absolutely dismantled its opponents throughout the rest of September and October, and then fell apart again last week. Final score against Louisville, 33-21. Again, a home loss for the Tigers, but that game was a lot more lopsided than the end score initiated.
It was 33-14 at one point before Clemson tacked on a late touchdown. The two teams with a pulse they've played have pummeled them pretty badly. Their mismatches have been complete blowouts in favor of Clemson. I think NC State has gotten better since then. I think NC State has a winning record now, or they're 5-4.
5-4.
But at the time of that game, NC State was playing really bad football, and Clemson hammered them. So Yeah, I don't. Clemson is not. They don't have the talent as they used to be. I was looking at mock drafts yesterday, and you don't know how much stock you put into a mock draft right now. But the one I looked at had Clemson with 1 second-round pick for this year's draft, and Virginia Tech with 2.
Wow.
Mansour Delane and Dorian Strong. So you could argue that, in the 2025 draft, Virginia Tech has more high-end talent than Clemson, which, they've had a year or two in the past where they've had 5 first-round draft picks. This is not the same Clemson team as it used to be in the past. They're still good, but they're not going to come in here and overwhelm Virginia Tech with talent all over the field.
I think that's what ticks Clemson fans off so much about the lack of using the transfer portal. It's like, you mean to tell me there's not anyone out there that couldn't help our roster? Like, you go out there, it's like, no, we're set, we're loyal to our guys. Like, I get that. But, you're going to have, busts at certain positions or, injuries that pop up, and all of a sudden you have a hole, a spot that you got to plug. And there's nobody out there for a team like Clemson that they could add to this roster to be better. And if I'm a Tigers fan, I'm screaming to high heaven about this, because that's the direction the sport has gone. Like, whether you want to go there or not, that's where everybody else has gone.
Right.
And the number of impact transfers, playing very well for all these other schools. So I think that's where a lot of that frustration comes. You look at the schedule that they played, lost to Georgia in the opener, beat App State, NC State, Stanford, Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia, and then lost to Louisville. So, like you said, NC State's the only sort of decent team, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of Virginia Tech in the second half of last year, where they beat a bunch of overmatched teams. Anytime they went up against a decent team, they got run off the field. Now, I don't know how to classify Virginia Tech this week. Are they a decent team, or are they, closer to the other ones, based on some of the injuries that they have and how they've played in close games? I don't really know how to classify that. I'd probably lean towards the latter, just because I haven't seen them beat a good team yet. But, Clemson, it's not quite where they were at their peak. They've lost a bit of a step, it seems like.
Louisville scored on 5 consecutive drives last week. The Cards also ran for 7.8 yards per carry against Clemson, 210 total yards for 3 touchdowns on the ground for Louisville last week against the Tigers. For Clemson, like you had mentioned, Andy, this game kind of lost the wind in its sails, so to speak, as far as the hype for Virginia Tech and somewhat for the Tigers, but they are playing for a chance at the ACC championship. They do just have 1 conference loss. They've played a lot of conference game, 5-1 conference record at this point. Feels like they've played more than anybody else has in ACC.
Florida State, who's done.
Florida State's done.
That's crazy.
1-7 in the clubhouse at 1-7.
Man.
That's crazy. That's because they started the year with an ACC game, 2 right off the rip.
Plus they have the weird Patsy before they play Florida at the end of the year.
Right.
They have some FCS team, I think, before they play Florida. First of all, that Florida State game. Oh boy.
Yeah.
That's gonna be an interesting
one.
Snoozer.
Yeah. Well, maybe entertaining for the wrong reasons, and in a way, and people will tune into
Which
that.
fan base wants to get rid of its coach more?
See, I think Florida is going to beat them handily, and then Florida fans are going to be pissed because of it.
They might. Yeah, I could see that.
Very well could be. Well, for Clemson, they're still playing for a chance at the ACC championship. They got Virginia Tech, then they're at Pittsburgh. They host the Citadel, and then they play South Carolina at home. And South Carolina just took down number 10 Texas A&M, so that's by far and away no gimme. But they still have something to play for here, so I think that's definitely a part of this.
I think so too. Look, both teams have something to play for. Virginia Tech, are they going to win an ACC title? No, but this is football in Lane Stadium, and you're playing Clemson. This is fun.
Can clinch a bowl game.
Right. Once you get out there on that football field, all that other stuff shouldn't matter. You're supposed to, you come to Virginia Tech to play teams like Clemson and have fun playing in Lane Stadium. That's the main reason you come here.
That's a good point.
So from that standpoint, you've got it all to play for. Because for a lot of these guys playing for Virginia Tech, this might be the biggest atmosphere of their career that they play in. So, it's huge from that standpoint. And yes, it's massive for Clemson. Clemson has to win this football game if they want to win the ACC title and have any chance of making the playoffs at all. It's a big game for both sides.
I think I worry less about the moment in the game. Once you get on the field, you're like, all right, everything's going, juices are flowing, you're playing the game hard and all that stuff. I think it's the week of prep leading up to that is where, if you have a really devastating loss or the wind's out of your sails for, competing in the ACC, do you give that same day-to-day practice effort and leading up to it in preparations? You can turn it on game day, but if you don't have that backing behind it and all the preparation for it, you can come out flat in a game.
I think you both bring up terrific points. Let's talk about this Clemson offense led by quarterback Cade Klubnik. Seems like he's kind of finally figured it out in his second full season as a starter. Came in for DJ Uiagalelei a handful in 2022, was a full-time starter for the first time last season, and then again this year, completing 65% of his passes for over 2,000 yards, 21 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. He's been pretty efficient, Chris.
Yeah, you really take care of the football like that, you give yourself a chance to win. Also, an underrated runner. 53 carries, 270 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. Like, he generally is not going to be a dynamic gash the defense type guy, although he did that to NC State, I believe, with 70 yards on just 4 carries. But he's solid. He's a very dependable runner for them, and compared to their running back and combined with their running back, makes for a good running game. But yeah, completing almost 2/3 of his passes, 7-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, this guy's a very, very dangerous player. I think the Virginia Tech pass defense is going to be a little bit more of a challenge for him than most of the opposition he's faced this year. Like, his 2 worst games have come against, Louisville and Georgia, and they have good defenses. But at the same time, it's hard for me to actually judge how good Virginia Tech's pass defense is this year, because how well have they done against starting quarterbacks who were good? Like, they feasted on backup quarterbacks or quarterbacks who would go on to get benched, right?
Sure.
Whenever they faced a solid starter, they've lost. So there's 2 ways to look at that. But I think he's a good player. I think what holds their passing game back more than anything is they're basically starting 2 true freshman receivers, maybe because they don't use the portal to go out and get more experienced players and things like that. But we know as Virginia Tech fans that when you start true freshmen anywhere, really, but especially at receiver, like it limits you. I mean, Tech has had some really good receivers over the years have to start as true freshmen, and it limited the offense. I mean, guys like Jarrett Boykin was a really, really good receiver. Tyrell Roberts, they were starting as true freshmen before they were ready. And, even that 2004 group that won the ACC title, they didn't get going in the passing game until later in the year, once those true freshmen had really settled in. So, when you start a large number of young players at one position, it can limit you.
I guess with Klubnik, I was sort of surprised that it came together this year, but I guess I shouldn't have been. I mean, the 5-star talent they recruited, second year as the full-time starter. Those guys take a while to develop too. And if you don't have help around you, they didn't have any receivers to throw to last year, I don't think. And he's looked pretty good. He's been efficient this year. Still some occasional, decision making, questionable there. But he had 9 picks last year. He's down to 3 this year. So he's really cut down on the interceptions. Turning into the 5-star player that they thought he'd be. So I've been impressed by him so far.
Going through some of the numbers here of this Clemson offense, and we're going to get into this running game. We're going to get into the receivers as well. 3rd best scoring offense in the ACC. That's good for 9th in the country. 2nd best total offense in the ACC. 22nd best passing and rushing offense in the country. That's 5th best in the ACC, but they are the top rushing team in the ACC by quite a margin as well. Red zone offense ranks 38th in the country. 8th best turnover margin in the country, 24th in the nation on 3rd down. And again, it starts with that top rushing attack in the ACC. Phil Maffa, 853 yards on the ground, 8 touchdowns. He's 3rd in the ACC behind only Tootin and Omarion Hampton at UNC.
Fortunately for the Hokies, their run defense has been really shored up lately.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
bad timing for this matchup.
Yeah, Phil Maffa, 106 yards per game, 230 pounds. Doesn't sound particularly imposing, right? After you get crushed right up the middle by a 194-pound running back, now you get to face a guy, basically Jaden Keller at running back is who they're going up against this year. This guy is a big, strong, tough guy who always falls forward. Even in the loss to Louisville last week, when the team got dominated, he ran for 170 yards.
Yeah,
this guy's a very, very good player. And you hope the run defense of Georgia Tech shows up, obviously. But then again, Georgia Tech, they didn't have Haynes King, who's such a huge part of their running game.
Right. You didn't have to worry about the pass against them.
Right. So doesn't look good on paper for Virginia Tech from a run defense standpoint. But I think you're going to have to slow them down. I mean, you're not going to stop this if you're Virginia Tech. If you just look at the numbers for Virginia Tech, in yards per game rush defense, they've gotten worse from last year. in yards per carry allowed. They've gotten marginally better, but not enough to move the needle. So this is a run defense that, I mean, you're 9 games into the season. There's a big enough sample size. You have to say this is a below average rush defense. And now they're facing a 230-pound running back that's averaging over 100 yards a game. I mean, you do the math on that. The numbers don't favor Virginia Tech in this one, at least from not from that matchup.
They're similar to Tech in the sense that it's Phil Maffa and then kind of everybody else in the running back room. Their second leading rusher is actually their quarterback. And then it goes Jay Haynes, 31 carries, 151 yards, a single touchdown, similar numbers to Malachi Thomas. And then no other rushers have 100 or more yards for Clemson. So it's Maffa, and he's the guy you got to worry about. But he doesn't come off the field a lot.
Are you going to bring out like some Chris Berman nicknames for him? Like he's a bad Maffa Allah or something like that when you're at the game? I feel like you need to for 3304 the broadcast. There.
Maybe I'll have to. I'm calling it with Carter, so I'll have to get with Carter and.
Okay, I got to jump in.
Don't even tell him. Just do it. Just see how he responds.
My favorite Chris Berman nickname of all time, and this is back when he was first getting started doing this. The Pirates, I think it was, had a pitcher named Bert Blyleven.
Some of the Twins too.
Yeah, he was
World Series winner in 1987.
Berman called him Bert Be Home Blyleven.
Oh, nice.
That's a good one.
My favorite.
He did work quick.
My favorite Berman. Well, it was a commercial actually, but for a while they did the Bristol University School of Football in their commercials, and he was the professor, and a student comes up to him with like one of those old printed off sheets that are stuck together. You know that. Professor Berman, I have the results of the Brett Favre stays in Atlanta scenario. And he's like, oh, interesting. June Jones named Coach of the Year.
That was the one where he's like testing him on the nicknames. He's like, Drew Bledsoe. And the student's like, Drew, he bled so much he needed to transfuse. It's like, trick question. He doesn't have a nickname or something like that. So, classic Sports Center commercials.
Yep.
Those classic Sports Center commercials are undefeated. Let's talk about these Clemson receivers a little bit. By the way, the best Chris Berman phrase is always going to be nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. That's always my favorite.
Had to get a mention in of upstate New York. Just had to get it in.
Love the Bills. Yeah. Let's talk about these receivers. Antonio Williams, 34 catches, 418 yards, 6 touchdowns. He's their leading receiver. Chris, he's small, a little undersized, slot guy at 5'11".
Yeah, I mean, he's been their most productive, probably most consistent receiver this year. In fact, I think he's got 35 catches. I believe he's their only wide receiver with more than 21 catches.
That's correct.
And I think they've got a couple of true freshmen like TJ Moore. I think has 21.
He's big, 6'3".
Troy Stellato has 22 according to this.
Looks 22. They've got another true freshman whose name escapes me.
Wesco.
Well, yeah, Wesco. He's got 18. Williams has definitely been the most consistent of those wide receivers. But overall, like, it's not a group of wide receivers that scares you very much. I mean, when you're starting two true freshman receivers, that's probably going to be the case in more times than not. The tight end concerns me, though.
Yep. Brenningstool.
Brenningstool?
Yeah.
That's a good goal. We'll have to consult the game notes.
Jake. We'll call him Jake.
We'll call him Jake.
Exactly. 32 catches for the year, 4 touchdowns. Tight ends have given Virginia Tech some trouble this year. So, honestly, I've got my eyes on number 9 in the passing game, Brenningstool, probably as much or more as I do any of those wide receivers.
Jake from Brentwood, Tennessee. So instead of Jake from State Farm, we'll say Jake from Brentwood.
Just call him 9. Be like a coach.
9.
That's what a defensive-minded coach would do. Bud Foster would go, 9's got some real skills out there.
Yeah, Juan's a true freshman. He can give you some trouble on the outside.
He's 2 catches shy of the lead that Antonio Williams holds. 32 catches, 349 yards, 4 touchdowns. Definitely a threat through the air. How about this offensive line? Number 2 in the ACC in pass block, 14th nationally. Here's what's so interesting to me, Chris. They run the ball so well, it just goes to show how talented Maffa is as a runner and Klubnik, because they're number 8 in the ACC in run block and 60th nationally according to PFF.
Yeah, sometimes I think PFF can be a little harsh with their run blocking grades. That'd be one criticism I have of them. But this is an experienced offensive line. You've got like 4 guys returning as starters, I believe, and you've got an experienced backup that they'll rotate in there at offensive guard as well. So it's a good group. And again, 170 rushing yards last week. But at the same time, what is the talent level that they faced? But when you think about it, and Virginia Tech's being so inconsistent, The Tech's linebacker play isn't great. I know a guy who's a former college football player who watches a lot of Virginia Tech film, and he's told me that he thinks the Virginia Tech defensive line sometimes will freelance. They will not take their assigned gaps quite as much as they should in some situations, and that maybe hurts them a little bit too. I think it's a talented group, but maybe they don't play within themselves sometimes. It's a solid Clemson offense for sure. I mean, exactly how good are they? I can't put my finger on it because the two defenses they've played that have a pulse, basically, have shut them down.
Sure. We'll know more on Saturday. Anything else on the offense, Andy or Chris, before we talk about some stats with Scott Glesner?
Tristan Lee, that's a throwback name.
It is.
I don't think Tech was ever seriously in the mix for him, but he's a Fairfax guy. He was one of those top ranked or top 5 guys in the state.
That was Clemson or Penn State.
And people were like, "Oh man, you got to get some of those." Never did.
There's a few like that. He doesn't play very much this year, but Sherrod Koval's a junior safety from Virginia that Virginia Tech recruited a lot. Ryan Linthicum, their starting center, is from Maryland, and Virginia Tech recruited him heavily.
That name sounds familiar.
I believe he took at least one visit to Tech. But anyway, on to Scott. Stat time with Scott Glesner.
Well, first, as always, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. As our presenting sponsor, First Bank and Trust Company's support has been invaluable to TSL, helping us to bring you all the great content across all of our platforms. They offer a variety of checkings and savings account options that are sure to meet your banking needs, including free checking. Visit firstbank.com to find the account that's right for you. Will, what you got in the fourth chair with stat time?
Scott's got some good ones today. So first, I'm going to start with a note, and then I think I'm going to give all 5 of Scott's stats today, and then another note. So the first note is, so they're doing the stripe effect in Lane Stadium. Do you guys remember when they did the card stunt back for the 2017 game? Do you recall that?
I don't recall that. I remember the first stripe
vaguely.
effect.
It said this is home, right?
Yeah.
No, I think that was ECU.
Okay.
No, I thought it was a stripe for ECU also. I thought that was the very first one in 2016. I don't know. Anyway.
So we have a picture in our media library that I'm going to have Nick post-process put it up on the video so fans can see what we're talking about. It was fairly elaborate for a card stunt. On the east side of the stands, it had the state of Virginia in orange with the word "Let's Go" on top of it. And then over on the west side where the press box is, it said Hokies in white, and it looks like there's a little Hokie bird in the upper left. So when you guys see it, you'll recognize it.
What game was that?
That, according to my notes, was the 2017 game against Clemson in Lane Stadium.
Okay, when Clemson beat them pretty soundly in that. I think somebody made the joke where this that one side says "Let's go," and the other side said "Home." Hokies.
That's good. So Andy recalls. All right, so let's get into stat time with Scott Glesner.
Are you saying, Will, they're doing that again this week?
No,
or no?
I'm just saying.
Because I've always wished they would do that again. It looks super cool.
It was very cool, and the stadium. Let me pull up. Let's see. That was 2017, which means Virginia Tech was ranked 12th, and Clemson was ranked 2nd. Game day. That was a big time game. So the stands were packed, and you can do a good card stunt when the stadium is completely full. Scott usually surprises me with his stats, and this one really surprises me. Clemson has scored in 25 straight quarters against Virginia Tech, including a touchdown in 15 straight quarters.
Wow. Oof. That's almost 4 games worth of scoring.
Yeah, that's nasty. Clemson has won 6 games in a row against the Hokies, and it makes sense because Clemson in those 6 games has scored 23, 38, 38, 42, 31, and 45.
So that dates back to 2011 when they beat Tech twice.
That was like the baton passing at that point.
It was,
Yeah, and
was the first one really cold early in the?
It was freezing.
That was before I got on the beat.
It was freezing. I went to a concert in Roanoke the night before, and it wasn't that bad. But overnight, it just. I remember we actually probably shouldn't say this, but at our tailgate, we kind of like chopped a tree branch off and set it on fire to start a fire and stay warm. It was freezing.
Huh. That was like September.
Yes,
something like that.
It was October 1st.
October 1st, right.
Cold.
And I've been to a game on December 1st against Miami and wore shorts when I was a student. Crazy.
It's 75 degrees out today.
Perfect day for a football game.
The 2001 game against Miami.
Yeah, that was the one.
Very warm. Yeah. Yeah, that not to wallow around in that 2011 season so much, but if you remember, Clemson's defense was bad. They gave up well over 30 points a game.
That was the year West Virginia dropped 70 on them
in the Orange Bowl and got Kevin Steele, I think it was his name, fired. But yet they held Virginia Tech to 3 and 10 points in 2 games, and that's a
Well, the second one, everybody's like, oh, they knew the plays, right? In the ACC championship
There
game.
was a play in the ACC title game where we handed it off to David Wilson, and we hadn't run that type of action on a running play all year. And their cornerback walked up to it, like just walked up to it. Nobody blocked him, and he made the tackle, just like they knew it was coming.
I think Clemson, like Venables, was pretty well known. Well, I guess that was pre-Venables, but Clemson's pretty well known for like picking up on signals and that kind of thing. So I remember we asked Mike O'Kane after that, like, did they know your plays? And he's like, no. And we're like, how do you know that? It's like, because I asked them. It's like, well, do you think they would tell you the truth? Like, I guess he was like friend. Like, he used to coach at Clemson, I think, at some point in his career. But I guess he talked to his people on the staff. It's like, did you know our plays? It's like, I don't know if I believe them if they asked you, if they told you that.
Andy, are you saying that there's a sign stealing scandal going on at Clemson?
It's not a scandal if you can just pick up the signals on the sideline. Like, come on, that's like baseball sign stealing. Like, have better signs.
Sure. Yeah. What you got, Will?
So in that 6-game winning streak, the Clemson has won and I tend to call him Clemson instead of Clemson, so forgive me. Clemson has won the turnover battle 17-4 in that 6-game winning streak. So that's nasty, and that'll do it. Tech won five games in a row before that, and they won the turnover battle 14-10 in those 5 games. Clemson has 2 or more sacks against Virginia Tech in the last 11 games. Nick, what's the buy or sell? Didn't you have a buy or sell line about that?
3.
3+. Okay, interesting. The highest total in yards that Virginia Tech has versus Clemson on record is 416 yards in the 2001 Gator Bowl, when a guy named Michael Vick was playing for the Hokies. In the last 5 contests, Clemson has eclipsed 416 yards 3 of those times. And let's see. And I thought I wanted to challenge you guys with a little bit of trivia here, so give me a second. This one's fairly lengthy. Virginia Tech has not had a 100-yard rusher in the last 5 games against Clemson. Clemson has only one 100-yard rusher in the last 13 games against Virginia Tech. That's a bizarre stat. And that rusher was Andre Ellington in the 2011 ACC championship game. He had 125 yards rushing. On a side note, the only time Virginia Tech had a 100-plus yard receiver was also in that ACC championship game. So there was a wide receiver for Tech that had 100-plus yards receiving. Who was it?
DJ Coles.
Bingo. He had 100 and what did Scott say?
Because he scored their only touchdown against Clemson for the entire year in 8 quarters of football. Yeah. It was a long touchdown pass. And that made it like 10-10 or something.
It was a tight game at halftime, and then they scored like 3 touchdowns in the third quarter and put it out of reach.
Yep, he had 116 yards receiving, so very nice.
DJ Coles from, do you remember what high school he went to?
Is he Goochland?
Goochland. There you go. I don't know how we know this.
You're an encyclopedia. you continue to impress, Chris.
So, Gio, I got one more thing, and this is going down the rabbit hole. If you've never seen it, Damian Salas on the stats website, the custom stats website he does a thing called Scoregami.
Yep.
And that is a chart where it shows all the possible scoring combinations in a football game. And he's got the blocks filled in for scores that have occurred in Virginia Tech football in the past. And so I was just looking at that while you guys were talking. And in 1911, Virginia Tech beat Roanoke College 94-0.
Now, see, even Will and I don't even remember that one. We can't break out any stats from that game.
And in 1919, 8 years later, they topped it by beating Emory and Henry 99-0.
Talk about running up the score, man.
Do you think the call-in show the next week was like, they should have gone for 100? Come on, coach, have a killer instinct.
Why didn't you go for 2? So back at the other end of the shutout spectrum, 31 times the score in a Virginia Tech football game has been 6-0.
How many times?
31 times.
Do I remember? Nah. When's the last time that happened?
I remember a 6-3. That one stands out pretty prominently.
So the older Hokies will remember this one. The last time that 6-0 score occurred was 1981 against VMI.
Oh yeah, the infamous VMI game.
Yes, that is a very painful memory for older Hokies. And one last note, Virginia Tech football has ended in a 0-0 tie 17 times. Yay.
Well, we know for a fact that'll never happen again because of overtime rules.
Correct. So the last time that happened was in 1938 against Richmond. So scoregami is quite the rabbit hole if you pull it up and look at it.
I think somebody's going to score this weekend. Most likely.
I'm confident somebody will score. Hopefully the Hokies are going to do it against Clemson's defense, because I'll tell you what, the Tigers do not impress a ton on the defensive side of the football. They run a 4-3 and a 4-2-5 just for the schematics of it. 4 down linemen, 2 edge rushers, and 2 tackles. They did lose their top safety from last year, Andrew Makuba. They lost him to Texas. He's playing for the Longhorns, and Steve Sarkisian this season. The best stat, I guess, defensively for Clemson, they're 22nd best on third down in the country this year, but number 51 in total defense, 54 in passing defense, 59 rushing defense, 68 in scoring defense. They're allowing over 24 points per game, so maybe there's something Virginia Tech can exploit.
It's interesting. You look at some of their advanced stats. I want to say their opponents are only picking up 38% of their available yards against Clemson, which is a very good number. Doesn't quite match up with some of their traditional stats, so maybe they're getting an extra possession or two. Maybe Clemson scores so quickly, so there's extra possessions in a Clemson game. One thing to keep your eye on is they're one of the worst teams in the country in yards per carry allowed. I think they're 95th in the country. Like, teams are gashing them for gains. It's not necessarily showing up in their total yardage standpoint or their available yards and things like that, but there are yards to be had there. Pretty much the exact same as Syracuse, like we pointed out last week with Syracuse. And Virginia Tech had running success on Syracuse. I think Virginia Tech should be able to get some yards, find some yardage in this game in the run game. It's there. As long as the game remains close and the Hokies don't have to drop back and throw it 30 or 35 times, and they're able to run the ball an effective number of times in the game, I think there's yardage to be had.
That's such an unusual thing for Clemson, because normally they just suffocate you on the ground. There's just nothing there. You mentioned 95th in country, 4.61 yards per carry. This stat is from David Teal. He sent it to us this week. And I went and looked it up. I don't know why I did. If Teal looks it up, it's right. That is Clemson's worst yards per carry average since 1975.
Wow, that's incredible.
So I went back, I looked it up. Sure enough, I mean, that is a long time. So this is not the same Clemson defense
What
that
year
you're
were you
used
born?
to. That was before I was born.
That was before you were born.
It was 4 years before I was born there. So everybody can do the math on that and figure it out. But yeah, this is just not the same kind of Clemson defense that you think of. And it's a couple years without Venables now, and you think you lose a defensive coordinator like that and you replace him. It's not always the same. Maybe you're seeing that a little bit in this rush defense.
Lost their offensive coordinator too, in Tony Elliott, who went to UVA a handful of years back now. So it almost seems like by losing both those guys, Clemson has not been quite the same.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. I think not recruiting in the transfer portal has hurt them. But also at the same time, I mean, when they were good before, there was no transfer portal, and their high school players were turning into first-round picks, right? And they're not doing that anymore. I do think they had one first-round pick last year, but I mean, there was one year where they had like 5 first-round picks and 15 overall draft picks.
Well, they had one where they had, I think, all 4 of their defensive linemen got drafted.
Right.
And it was
that was like Christian
Dexter
Wilkins.
Lawrence, Christian Wilkins, who was the defensive end that went to the Raiders, number 4. He was from Richmond, I thought, something like that.
I know who you're talking about.
I mean, they had a run there in the defensive line that was just ridiculous. And they've got talent there now. I'm not saying they're not talented in that room, but it's not the same level that it was.
I think they've got some young talent on this team. I think their best defensive end is T.J. Parker. In fact, I know he's their best defensive end from a pass rushing standpoint. He's only a true sophomore, and their best cornerback is, excuse me if I mispronounce this. I meant to look at the pronunciation guide this morning, but I was supposed to get a new HVAC installed tomorrow, and instead they surprised me and came today. So
that's nice.
It kind of took off a chunk of my morning. But Avion Terrell, or Avion Terrell, I don't know, but 5'11", 180, true sophomore. He's playing great for them this year. So I do think there's a little bit of a talent upgrade with some of their younger guys in the program, but there does seem to be a couple recruiting classes for them that didn't quite hit at the highest levels like some of their previous classes did.
Yeah, and they had some guys after the championship years, like Isaiah Simmons. I think he might have been on that last championship team.
Trotter, the linebacker.
Balin Spector plays for the Buffalo Bills. He's a solid player.
Cleveland Farrell was the name I was trying to think of.
That's right.
So let me jump in here and say you're talking about the 2019 draft when Clemson had drafted 4th, 13th, and 17th. Defensive end Cleveland Farrell, defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, and defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence. And then in the 4th round, Austin Bryant, defensive end, was drafted also. So all 4 of their linemen were drafted in the first 4 rounds, 3 of them in the first round.
Cleveland Farrell was one of the guys who started the recruiting shift because he was considered a heavy tech lean. It was right after Kavanaugh had left, so Richmond got passed off to a different recruiter. And
Who shall remain nameless.
I heard Virginia Tech was very overconfident about that Cleveland Farrell recruitment.
Right.
And they were really upset when he picked Clemson. But that sort of jump started, besides the results on the field in 2011, of course, that sort of jump started Clemson's. They were always good at recruiting, but they were starting to get to the point where they could go to a lot of different states and pull in a lot of different states' top players. And that's really when their talent level started taking off. And that was at the expense of Virginia Tech to a certain extent.
Chris, what do you think about Peter Woods? He's kind of been tabbed as one of the more talented.
At first, I had to look and see if that was a misprint. You don't see too many 315-pound defensive ends in a 4-man line.
But he plays inside a lot, too.
Yeah, I mean, they can slide him down and put an outside linebacker on the outside. So a lot of these defenses these days, they're multiple fronts as far as how they align their players. But you would especially expect to see that in obvious running situations, where you slide him down and you've basically got three defensive tackles and a walk-up linebacker, so you've got like 2 defensive ends. So you could see some of that. And then Clemson's got good, solid linebackers. Barrett Carter is their projected highest draft pick in this draft as of right now, as a 2nd-round pick. Super versatile. Yeah, I mean, I still think Clemson's personnel defensively is good. Maybe they don't quite have the depth on that side of the ball, but again, in some of their younger players like Terrell and Parker and even Woods are probably some of their best defensive players. So it does look like they've got a good future there. Like I said, I think they just missed a couple recruiting classes.
Worth noting with Peter Woods, he got hurt against Louisville, and Dabo Swinney said that he is day-to-day. So we'll see how that...
We know how honest coaches are.
Does that put him probable for the game? And I don't know.
We know
it means he's in a wheelchair.
On the Virginia Tech sliding scale, both legs are broken.
Right. Last individual player that stood out was Wade Wadaz. What a name as well. He has 3 forced fumbles. That's good for 3rd in the ACC.
Yeah, and that's probably another reason why their defense sometimes seems to overperform their traditional metrics. They'll force some turnovers. They're I think they're top 15 in turnover margin this year. But their main thing is they rarely turn it over offensively.
Yep. Only 3 interceptions.
So that's kind of that's I probably should have mentioned this in my preview, but that's a storyline here. Clemson hardly ever turns a football over. Virginia Tech has forced 2 turnovers in each game for how many straight games? 5 now? 6?
4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
5 games, Nick. So that's something to watch for in this game. So something there has got to give, really. Either Virginia Tech's going to keep forcing turnovers, or Clemson's going to continue to not turn the ball over. And I think turnovers are important for Tech in this game. They broke even with Syracuse. Even in regulation, they were +1 against Syracuse and still couldn't win the game. You can't break even and expect to beat Clemson. I feel like you've got to. My goal for this game would be +2. But that's going to be hard to do against a Clemson team that doesn't turn it over.
Especially since that feels so integral to Virginia Tech's defensive success.
Yes.
I mean, how many turnovers have they forced in the red zone?
Absolutely.
The two they had last week was a pick in the end zone, and then Mansour stripped that ball, and they recovered it at the 19. So there's that streak there where it was inside the 6-yard line, but they sort of extended a little bit here with a couple of red zone turnovers forced in that game. So you take those away, and it gets a lot harder to play red zone defense or keep them off the board, which they've been pretty good at so far.
So what do we consider, because I actually want to know this so I can put it on my play-by-play chart for the weekend. What do we consider a red zone turnover? Mansour picks it off in the end zone for a touchback, but Kyle McCord throws that ball from the 50-yard line.
Technically, it's not a red zone turnover,
right? Yeah. But where they got the ball, sure, is kind of where I'm looking at it. I mean, if you pick a ball off in the end zones, they were making an attempt to throw it it into the end zone on you, and you defended it pretty well. So
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know how they
Still, the turnover point still stands. No matter
Oh
who
yeah,
slices it.
they're turning. Yeah, they're creating.
Clemson doesn't
turnovers.
turn it over.
Yeah,
So.
and honestly, to Tech's credit, they're not bending quite as much before the turnover. So
So to add some context to that, Clemson is tied for number 8 in the country in turnover margin at plus 1.13 per game. They are tied for number 2 in the country in turnovers lost with just 4 in 8 games.
very
So they've
3
only-
picks and 1 fumble.
So they've only lost 1 fumble all year, which is pretty incredible
three picks
number.
and 1 fumble.
Yeah, that especially with how well they run the football.
Yeah, and I want to say like Washington has only turned the ball over 3 times this year or something like that, which might be tops, which is pretty insane.
Yeah.
Well,
that
Tops is Army. They've only turned it over once.
Okay, so maybe I want to say Washington was the best non-service academy.
Okay.
Or something like that. Yeah.
That's crazy. Absolutely wild. All right, anything else defensively? We'll talk special teams and then get into some analysis and our picks.
I have nothing else.
All right, sweet. See if Virginia Tech can pounce on a mid-tier nationally Clemson defense here. Special teams wise, nothing crazy to note. I just think that they're not going to roll the dice, so to speak, kicking field goals. Nick Hauser, he's 12 of 16 on the year. His longest is 38 yards. He's 0 of 1 from 40 or beyond. So, they're probably not going to take too many risks.
He's a true freshman, so it's a small sample size. But if they've only used him once beyond 40 yards, that means they probably aren't quite convinced of his range at this point. Nick?
He had 2 blocked against Louisville, though.
Yeah, 2 blocked against Louisville. If you didn't know.
2 blocked.
2 blocked against
Yes.
Louisville. So that's interesting to note. And Virginia Tech just blocked a field goal. This past week.
PAT. Yeah.
Yep. When you look at their overall special teams, and this is really an indictment of their entire roster, but it trickles down to special teams. They're not explosive in the kicking game as far as their return men and things like that. And with Clemson in the past, they were dangerous everywhere. They had athletes all over the field, offense, defense, special teams. They just don't have the look of a team that's going to break one on you. On special teams, where normally in the past you play a team like Clemson and you expect they've got a guy like that at every position, right? And they just don't quite have that anymore. I mean, Virginia Tech's more dangerous in the return game than Clemson with Jay Lane back there. I mean, Virginia Tech's arguably got 2 punt returners better, and probably like if you put Tootin on kickoff return again, then you've probably got 3 overall better return men than Clemson has, which is not something that's normal for Clemson. Like I said, their talent level slipped.
That's one of my biggest question marks of this season is obviously because he's been playing banged up and they want to conserve him as much as possible. But, what would things have looked like with Tootin returning kicks? Because he showed some ability last season.
They are kickoff returns are kind of random.
Yeah.
But, you got to think. If he hadn't broken one for a touchdown, he would have broken 1 or 2 to at least like the 50 and maybe you get a touchdown out of it. But he's too good of a running back for me to risk on a kickoff return. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. For Clemson's returners, just to note, Jay Haynes, he's the second string running back. He's the primary kick returner. On the other side, Phil Maffa will stand. So either one of them can get it depending on where you kick it. And then their punt returner is Antonio Williams, who's that speedy wideout top receiver that we were talking about there. What do you guys think? We talked about what Virginia Tech has left to play here for. How much has this game lost a win out of its sails? We've kind of touched on all of this. What chance do you think this team stands if there is no drones, there is no Tootin, and you roll out the same offense as last week and you have a week's worth of tape on it?
You can see a path of victory because Tech ran the ball well last week, and Clemson has struggled to stop the run at times this year with that yards per carry defense. Counterpoint is Syracuse didn't have any film on those guys. So what Virginia Tech did last week is they kind of inverted their offense. We had, when it was drones and when it was Tootin, the quarterback runs were always inside with the stretch plays on the outside to the running back. And against Syracuse, it was basically the opposite, with Schlee going to the outside and the running backs going to the inside. Clemson will have film on that now, and they will know what to expect. And I seriously doubt, I didn't hear anything about drones not playing until the morning of the game, so I seriously doubt Syracuse had prepared for anybody other than drones.
Sure.
And Clemson will know that there's at least a chance that he doesn't play in this game, or that maybe they'll see 2 quarterbacks or whatever. So there's that counterpoint as well. The biggest thing for me though in this game is stopping their running game. If Virginia Tech stops their running game, they will have a chance, I think, to win the football game. But if they don't, then it's going to be tough sledding.
So run the football and stop the run. I did want to make a comment about, you were talking about when we found out that Drones was not going to play.
Sure.
And so that was announced like right before the game. And then I got an email. Somebody had commented on our preview video and said, Drones isn't going to play. Why didn't you talk about this on the podcast?
Just nobody knew it.
I wouldn't have picked Virginia Tech to win that game, had I known that.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have either. And to Carter's point, and I know you guys touched on it the other day, I don't think that Drones and Tootin not playing was the reason they lost that game.
No, they lost because they couldn't play defense in the second half.
Right.
That's basic. Yeah. I mean, you can nitpick. Maybe they would have scored an extra touchdown, but when you have that many yards and that many points, and you're up by 18, it shouldn't really be an excuse.
I mean, the replacement backs ran for 170 yards.
Which is, yeah.
Schley threw for 200, ran for 50, and had, I think, he counted for 2 touchdowns.
They basically put up Drones Tootin lines.
Yeah, they mimicked the stat line that those guys would have. So maybe there's some plays that would change in that whole thing, but I think that the defensive collapse at the end was going to be present regardless of who was playing quarterback and running back for the Hokies.
Where do you think Clemson gives Tech the most trouble? I would say that it's probably with their running game, and where can Tech try and exploit the Tigers?
I think it's both. I think you try to run the football.
Yep.
You got to run the football against them because you have a better chance of hitting big plays and extending drives through running against Clemson, in my opinion, just looking at the rough statistics. And then where they're going to give the Hokies the most trouble, I mean, obviously a 230-pound running back, man. A week after Tech kind of got run over by a 194-pound running back, I mean, the Hokie defense is going to have to put on its big boy pants this week.
And when we say that, and then like one of the better rushing defensive efforts was against Monunga earlier this year. And it's like, what?
Some of the
he
stuff
wasn't the guy that beat them.
Well, last week you're at Syracuse. It's like, what's the weak spot? Well, probably McCord up the middle against Tech's safeties in the passing game. Well, no, all of his success came on the outside. Right? So sometimes the stuff that happens just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And maybe part of last week was they keyed in so much on stopping the pass that all of a sudden Syracuse started running the ball down their throat. And
I don't know about that. I just saw linebackers just standing there and catching blocks.
Fair. You know a lot better than me, Chris. So I'll always follow your lead on that one. Let's predict this thing. We'll start with Will in the 4th chair.
So first of all, let's talk about what the fans have done so far. We've had the game preview up for a little while, and we're... Stop me if you've heard this phrase in the last 24 hours. In the early voting, we've got 210 votes in from the fans, and 60% of them have picked Clemson to win by 11 plus. Another 21% have picked Clemson to win by 1 to 10, so that's 81% picking Clemson to win. And as you guys will see when you get through our staff picks, they're all in the 30-something to 20-something range. My own personal pick is Clemson 34, Virginia Tech 24. A stat that I blundered into, and let me find it here. Virginia Tech's number 70. The Virginia Tech offense is number 74 in the country in converting third downs, and Virginia Tech's defense is number 84 on stopping the opponent on third down. Neither one of those are great. Clemson's number 24 in converting third downs on offense, and number 22 in stopping the opponent on defense. So third down conversions, stay on the field, get them off the field. That's a stat I wandered into that was not explicitly in the preview. So my pick's Clemson 34, Virginia Tech 24. Let me do David before we get out of here.
You got it.
David picked Clemson 38, Virginia Tech 20. And Nick has Clemson 35, Virginia Tech 24. So you see the pattern, 30-something to 20-something.
We'll go Andy.
I'm in the same range, 34-23 I went with. We don't know if Drones is playing, don't know if Tootin's playing, don't know if Delane's playing. There's a lot of question marks going into this. And, had I known that Drones and Tootin would not play last week, I would not have picked the Hokies to win that game. So I'm currently part of a class action lawsuit about last week's pick'em to try to get that point back. But you got to have your stars to play in a game like this and perform well to be able to win a game like this. And, you got a great performance by your backups last week. Are you going to get that every week? Are you going to get that after they have, it's on film and they know the personnel a little bit better, and perhaps are you going to play with those guys? So, Clemson's a ranked team coming in here. Virginia Tech has not done well against those kind of teams in the past, so I'm going to go with history here, and Tigers win by double digits.
I'm breaking trend slightly. I've got Clemson in the 30s at 31, and I've got Virginia Tech in the teens. I've got them at 17. I just don't know what they're going to have offensively. And if those starters can't play, Clemson will have had a week to study how Virginia Tech used the backups. There's going to be probably no surprises in this game, or at least certainly not as many as there were last week. But the main thing is, like, Virginia Tech has feasted on backup quarterbacks, injured quarterbacks, or future quarterbacks who are going to get benched, right? Even going back to last year, how many good quarterbacks did Tech beat? They were all pretty bad quarterbacks from what I can remember. And they don't fare well when they play healthy, good starting quarterbacks. That's what they're facing this week. So they have to break that trend, and I will keep picking them to lose games like this until they break that trend.
Fair. The reason that I had that buffer there is because Nick got his mic all set up, and then Will said his pick for him.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
That's okay.
Right.
That's
Well,
okay.
Nick, you can give your logic.
Yeah, do you want to give your logic, Nick?
Not much here. I do have a nitpick. The fans. I've seen some people on Twitter saying they'd be mad if Tech lost or won this game. Because it's like, oh, they could have gone to the ACC championship game if they had beaten Syracuse. Shut up. Shut up. Enjoy a ranked win, man. You'll be fine. Tech will probably storm the field if they win. Like, come on. Just enjoy a win if you win this game.
And that concludes Wise Words with the Mustache Man. Thanks, Nick.
And I will never unmute this again.
So, Gio, let's since we're getting late in the season, let's say where everybody is in the season long standings. So far this season, Chris and David are 8-1 in picking games. Nick and I are 7-2. Andy is 6-3. Andy and I both picked Tech to beat Rutgers. That failed us. Andy gambled on Tech beating Syracuse and didn't work out.
I was not given all the information. It was not represented fairly to me. Just like the officials at halftime with Brent Pry. Had I had all the information, I would have played that out differently.
How dare they tell the CW and not
That's
us?
right. They had a college sleeve package ready to go.
Yeah.
Oh, so you've got two guys at 8-1, two guys at 7-2, Andy at 6-3, and the fans are 7-2. The fans got burned by picking Virginia Tech to beat Vanderbilt and picking Virginia Tech to beat Syracuse. So the fans whiffed, won 7 in a row, and then whiffed.
Oh, they picked against Syracuse last. That's interesting for our fan base to pick Virginia Tech to win a game in the Carrier Dome.
It wasn't by a resounding margin. They picked Tech to win by 1-10, 48%.
Okay.
So
very close.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I got this one a little bit closer than everybody else thinks because I don't know, gut feeling. I think Tootin and Drones play. I don't know why. It's just maybe that's very wishful thinking in this one for the excitement of it. But I'll say Clemson wins it 31-27. I hope we're all wrong and Virginia Tech pulls off an upset.
Tack another one-score loss onto the ledger.
Another one, yes. That would do that. That would be 1-12 now.
Yes. That would be not good.
That would be
Whatever that.
that would be not good. Well, before we let everybody go, we do have to mention hoops off to a good start. Men's and women's basketball are now 1-0. The men took down Delaware State in a doubleheader. The women took down UNCW inside Castle. That was on Monday night. And a big one coming up for the women. They go down to Charlotte. They got the Ally tip-off against Iowa. So big opportunity for Duffy in game 2.
Same game as last year.
Same game, but both teams look a lot different.
Totally different.
Yeah.
So best 3 players, at least the best 3 players from that game are gone. Both head coaches are gone.
Yeah.
Both teams will find out a lot more about each other this week, but at the same time, like if you're Iowa, you're like, if Iowa wins the game, they're going to be like, okay, but how good is Virginia Tech this year? And if Virginia Tech wins the game, they're going to be like, well, that was impressive, but exactly how good is Iowa without the best player in the history of the sport, right?
Yeah.
And a different coach. So it's going to be fun and exciting, I think. But you like to think you'll learn something, and I'm sure you'll learn something, but you're not going to be sure till a little bit later.
2-0 would be nice, though,
Yes,
with a win like that
absolutely.
under your belt. Yeah. And it's a spectacle of an event. I was down there for it last year. This year they've added a game to it because I believe South Carolina plays. Who do they play, Nick? NC State before. So a fun one. And then the men's basketball team is in action again on Friday inside Castle. So get there.
Gio, did you specifically say that the women are playing at 5:30 and it's on ESPN2?
I did not, but you got it.
5:30 Sunday on ESPN2.
Definitely be sure to check that out. Big one for the women's team and the men in action Friday. Who do they play Friday? The men's team. Anybody know?
South Carolina Upstate.
USC
Everybody
Upstate.
knows that, Gio.
Come
on,
There we go. There we go.
And that is 7 o'clock Friday, and it's on ACC and X, so it's streaming.
Perfect. Any other thoughts before we let everybody go, guys? What's coming up editorial-wise this week before the game Saturday?
Mailbag on Thursday. That's what I got. That's all I got the rest of the week.
Normal week for me.
Normal.
And I don't know. David might do something else with basketball. I'm
Probably.
not sure, but
Probably. What do you got, Will, this week?
We're running a little bit. We're again going a little bit early this week. We're going to record buy or sell right after this. I will post the buy or sell article on the website, I think, this afternoon. So that'll give fans a chance to make their picks, and Nick can overlay that on the video.
The guys got a spotlight this week? Or are we off on spotlights
We're off
this
this
week?
week.
We're off this week on Triumph Spotlights. All right. Well, for Nick Brown behind the scenes, for Will Stewart, for Andy Bitter, Chris Coleman, I'm Giovanni Heater saying so long and enjoy the game on Saturday. Check out buy or sell and everything else coming out the rest of the week.